Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Rajat Paharia. I'm the founder and chief product officer at Bunchball, also the author of Loyalty 3.0, How to Revolutionize Customer and Employee Engagement with Big Data and Gamification. Does this sound okay? Am I sounding any better if I move around? I'm good? Okay. So today we're going to talk about work and the design of work. And so there's this really great article that was in HBR On Point back in 2000, and it was called The Service Profit Value Chain. And if we look at this, it actually really clearly lays out how so much of your business depends on your employees and their engagement. So we adapted it just really slightly. We just changed the very first line. Employee engagement drives employee satisfaction. That drives employee loyalty, which drives employee productivity, which drives value, which drives customer satisfaction, which drives customer loyalty, which drives your profitability and growth. Jeez. I'm being geo-fenced. They're telling me not to move. I'm gonna come over here maybe where it's safer. So if you believe this, then clearly your employees are the most valuable asset that you have at your company, right? Because everything that you do drives and falls out of their engagement and their satisfaction. And so if that's the case, then why is it that these gigantic consumer companies, Netflix, Amazon, and Facebook, who are amazing companies, but the most amazing thing about these companies is that they all know more about your employees than you do. If you think about that, that's a stunning fact, right? Why is it that these big consumer companies know more about your employees than you do? And the reason is because they're capturing the big data on user activity that your employees are generating as they're interacting with those systems, and they're using that to create a more engaging experience and drive customer lifetime value. They're capturing all this data and they're using it to drive LTV. Now, these very same employees are living in your sales, service, training, and collaboration platforms 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And the big question for you is, are you capturing the big data on user activity that they're generating as they're interacting with your systems? Because if you're not, you're missing a giant opportunity, right? You're missing this opportunity of capturing this big data, using it to create a more engaging experience, and then motivating better performance, driving better business results, and generating a competitive advantage in your market. There's companies out there doing exactly this today, and the kinds of results that they're seeing across all these different areas include a 9% increase in sales, a 10% increase in service levels, an 81% increase in collaboration, and a 373% increase in learning. When you combine all that with the effects of taking this big data and using it to motivate and engage on retention, so reduction in churn, as well as onboarding, ramping your employees much more quickly, we're seeing on average an increase of 11% of revenue per employee by just capturing this data that's out there in the world and using it. So the way that they're doing this is using this technique that we've all here talking about today called gamification. And it's funny that even at a conference like this, like my definition of gamification doesn't jive with like what a lot of other people here are talking about, right? We're seeing a lot about games and educational games and entertainment and education. I don't believe any of that's gamification. To us, gamification is something completely different. But first off, when people hear the word gamification, immediately they focus on the word game, right? That's the thing that jumps out at them. And then they immediately think of unproductivity, entertainment, or some random fuzzy benefit. But nothing could be further from the truth. Really, at the end of the day, it's about capturing this big data that everybody's generating and using that to motivate better performance and drive a hard ROI for your business. So my definition of gamification is really simple. It's about motivating people through data. The book I wrote, Loyalty 3.0, is all about this, right? It basically says that the new equation for the next generation of customer, partner, and employee loyalty is motivation plus big data plus gamification is the engine that drives participation, engagement, and loyalty. So it's about capturing this big data on user activity that your customers, partners, employees are generating as you're interacting with your systems and using that to drive better performance. So other phrases that often get used to describe this same concept: reward and recognize, measure and motivate, reputation, loyalty, guiding and amplifying high-value activity. These are all the same thing at the end of the day. They all boil down to this idea of motivating people through data. we've all turned into walking data generators. If you look at the amount of data any single one of us was generating 10 years ago, 5 years ago, today, it's gone up exponentially, right? Because we're all throwing off data, because everything we're doing is now happening in formal systems. It's being captured and enabled and mediated by technology. The other analogy I like to use here is a thermometer measures. So you have these systems, like your CRM system or your point of sale system, whatever, that are throwing off tons of data. And you might have really great analytics on that and reports and all sorts of data. And so just like a thermometer, you've got a very high degree of accuracy. You know what the temperature is. You know what's happening. But what use is a thermometer when it's 100 degrees outside and you're like dying, right? What you need is a thermostat, something that actively drives change, regulates the temperature, and gets it to a desired outcome. And that's exactly what gamification is. It's the thermostat for behavior, for motivation. It's the thing that takes all that data that's coming out of all your systems and uses it to motivate and drive behavior change to get you to a desired business outcome. So that's the key. That's what's actually happening in the world of work, and what employers are starting to do with gamification. They're using it to capture this employee activity data, analyze it, and then using it to increase the lifetime value of the employee. Now, this is a term you don't often hear. You hear lifetime value thrown out around consumers and customers all the time, because in the consumer space, they know this, right? They know exactly, like, this is my customer acquisition cost, and then this is my lifetime value, and therefore I'm going to make money if my CAC is less than my LTV. Right? And so, but in the employee space, people aren't thinking about lifetime value. They're not thinking about how do I get more and better out of the employees that I have, but now they're starting to, and gamification is the thermostat that enables that. So why is this inevitable? It's inevitable for a number of reasons. One, Mark Andreessen, famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur, started Netscape, now a venture capitalist, wrote a great article in the Wall Street Journal, which you should all go read if you haven't. But basically, the premise is software is eating the world. It's taking over everything, right? Everything we're doing is being mediated by technology. Old industries are being disrupted. Skype taking over telephony, Netflix taking over Blockbuster. Software is taking over all this stuff. And because of that, because so much more of our lives are being mediated by technology, it's all throwing off data. And that's turning us all into these walking data generators. Work has moved from very informal systems into formal systems, right? How did work used to happen? Work used to happen with me talking to you, or me emailing you, or phone calling you. And then, with email, it became in like semi-formal, right? Now it's at least in a structured system, but nobody's searching it, nobody can mine it, nobody can figure out what's going on in there. But now it's all moved into formal systems. My CRM happens in Salesforce.com. My contact center runs off of Nice Technologies Performance Management. Collaboration happens in systems like Jive, and ITSM happens in systems like BMC Remedyforce. It's all there, and it's all structured, right? You're no longer just sending email back and forth. You put in a lead or an account or an opportunity or closed a case with all these fields, and so we now know every time somebody adds something, updates something, makes a change, and we know exactly what they did. So we have all this raw material that we can take and we can use. And if you think about it, it's stunning that like all this data is out there and it's just floating off into the ether. Like if you go look at any big consumer website, you go look at yahoo.com, you look at comcast.net, any of these, they have teams of people dedicated to looking at their Omniture or Google Analytics, like web analytics data, right? And they know all the consumers that are hitting, they look at the funnels to see where people are dropping, and they have figured out how to use that data to increase the lifetime value of every one of their visitors and their customers. They have figured this out, right? And now you come into the employee space, and none of that's happening, even though they have all that same data at their disposal. And I think what's happened is this transition has happened so quickly from these kind of informal to formal systems that people just don't realize the opportunity that's waiting there, that they have all this data at their disposal and they can start using it to drive employee lifetime value. Now, when you're Cheers and Norm walks in the door and you say, Norm, like that's great. And you can do that when you've got like 10 regulars. But what happens when you have 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000? Like, how do you scale this system? How do you make this repeatable? How do you make it automated? You can't do that on a personal basis, whether you're a storefront, whether you're a workplace. You have to figure out how do you make this all automated. And that's exactly what gamification does. It captures this data on user activity that comes in, and it automatically applies it to motivate and drive performance. I was at a contact center conference recently, and they were I sat through like 4 sessions in a row where they were talking about like, look at the data that your agents are generating and we can see like things marked in red, and that tells you should be going and talking to them about something, their customer service skills, their upsell skills, how long they're spending on the phone, all that. And I was just like, this is the perfect application for gamification. This is what computers do. They look at data and they figure out what's happening, and then they can apply an automated intervention, and they can save the humans, the managers, for the work that really needs humans, right? It kind of amplifies their abilities. It's never about replacing managers. It's about augmenting and amplifying their abilities. So if you're a business owner today and you are not capturing the activity data that your users and your employees and your partners are generating as they're interacting with your systems, then you're going to get left behind, because that's the new secret weapon that designers have. I mean, clearly, they've learned it from the consumer space, right? That they can take that data and they can use it to make the experience better. But really, like at the end of the day, if you think about it, once you make the user experience as good as it can be, and you've made the process as efficient as it can be, what do you have left at your disposal? You have your people and your ability to motivate them to perform better. And that's like cold fusion, right? Like you can have an unending supply of that if you can just figure out how to tap into it. So to me, this is inevitable that this is actually happening. Now, the really important point I'd like to make today is that this is not at all about fun, right? Like, and I come to this conference, and honestly, it drives me freaking crazy to hear people talking about fun and play and games, right? It's not about fun at all. Making work more fun is not a good goal. It's a stupid goal. You should never try to do that, right? And because it's not work that is the problem, it's people's perception of work. Everything, the only difference between work and play is a bit that flips in people's heads. That's it. I could be managing a spreadsheet of crops in Farm Bill and widgets at work. I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing it in Excel. The famous story is Mark Twain, right? Tom Sawyer. So beautiful summer day. Tom's Aunt Polly says, you need to go out and paint the front fence. And he's like, well, this stinks. I'd much rather be down at the lake playing with my buddies. But he's out there painting in the hot sun, and then one of his friends comes by and starts taunting him and saying, I'm going down to the lake, sucks to be you, Tom, like all this kind of stuff. And Tom decides, I'm going to pretend like there's nothing in the world I'd rather be doing than painting this fence right now. So he kind of ignores his friend, and he's standing back, and he's admiring his handiwork. And then, I missed a spot over here, okay. And then his friend's like, hey, maybe, could I try that? No. If it was the back fence, maybe. This is the front fence, and it's much too important, right? And at the end of the day, his friend has paid him to paint the fence, and he's got a whole army of friends that have paid him to paint the fence, and he's sitting there in the shade with all his riches. So what does this tell you? They were all doing the same thing. They were all painting out there in the hot sun with a brush, but to some of them it was work, and to some of them it was play. It was just a bit that flips in people's head. Mark Twain very astutely says, work is something that you're obliged to do, and play is something that you're not obliged to do. That's it. Have to versus want to. If you remember nothing else about gamification, at least my definition of it, I hope you remember two things. One is it's about motivating people through data, and the second is it's about turning things from I have to into I want to. And fun, I think, is kind of it's a red herring. It's a distraction, right? If somebody is out there playing tennis, and they're playing tennis because the coach is forcing them to, or their parents are forcing them to, do you look at that situation and do you say, tennis is broken, how do I make tennis more fun? Clearly, tennis isn't fun enough. I need to make it more fun. Clearly, work isn't fun. I mean, you look at that and you go like, no, that's stupid. It's all about my motivation. I'm either out there playing because I want to be playing or because I have to be playing. And if I have to be playing, I'm not motivated to do it. It's only if I want to be out there playing, if I'm doing it just for the sheer joy of it. So I encourage you, I implore you, don't be thinking about like how do you make work more fun and into games. It's all about changing people's perception of the task. Just to give you another quick example, let's say, how many of you have seen Microsoft's Ribbon Hero, right? I think this is a super good example. So if you haven't heard of it, Ribbon Hero 2, you can go download it, ribbonhero.com. They built a plugin for Microsoft Office that teaches you via gamification how to use the Office suite. And so the basic premise is, in version 1, you had in Word and Excel and PowerPoint, there were separate like little mini games you played, and each one you were given a goal, and you earned points, and you unlocked badges, and you had a leaderboard for learning how to use these tools that you use every day, and it was great. In version 2, they amplified it, made it even better by adding this whole storyline that weaved together all the goals. And so your story was, it was about Clippy. I don't know how many of you remember Clippy. He was fired from Microsoft like 10 years ago. He's been living in his mother's basement, and now she's kicking him out, and you have to help him go get a job. And so your very first task is take his resume and turn it from Comic Sans into Calibri, like something more professional. And then as you're working your way through the story, you're given tasks that make you use Excel and PowerPoint and OneNote and Word, and you're learning as you're doing those things. So this is great. So you've got this image of Ribbon Hero. So let's say your boss comes to you someday, and he says, you need to learn, you're a brand new employee, you need to learn Microsoft Office, go play Ribbon Hero. And you're like, this is great, I get to play a game at work, and you're doing this thing, but it's still like he's telling you have to do it. Then he comes back 2 days later, you're halfway through, you've gotten Clippy like so far, like he's in the Middle Ages, he's like ready to get a job, whatever, and then your boss comes back and says, forget that, now you gotta go learn Salesforce.com. So the big question is, do you continue playing Ribbon Hero, right? And this is like where that whole have to versus want to hinges. If they've sufficiently engaged you and compelled you into the experience and you really want to know what happens to Clippy at the end, then yes, you do continue playing and you learn by doing it because they very successfully turned have to into want to. So remember, not about fun, it's all about people's perception of the tasks and what actually motivates them. So at the end of the day, gamification is really about closing the loop, right? We saw that loop with all this data coming out of these systems, but then what do you do with that data? You look at it, you analyze it, you maybe go change a product, but how do you actually use it in real time to drive behavior change and get you to an outcome? And if you're interested, I highly recommend in this space of work, Robin Jenkins from RMH, one of the biggest Applebee's franchisees, is going to be talking tomorrow morning about how Applebee's and this particular franchisee is using gamification connected to their point of sale system to motivate servers to perform better. And so it's exactly that. All this data has been flying out of that point of sale system forever, but it's only been going up to managers who have been looking at it. It's never been going down back to the employees generating it all and being fed into a loop to motivate them to perform better and drive business outcomes. And so it's really exciting. I highly recommend her talk tomorrow morning. So in the case of just general work things that you can do, there's hiring, right? So once you've built in a gamification system and you've profiled what your top performers do, my top performers tend to share more. They put their opportunities more early. They work these things through the stages. Once you've identified and understood and have that insight, you now have the engine that you can use to motivate everybody else to do those same behaviors because you know it will drive the good outcomes, right? Again, it's all about closing the loop. You can tell people's progress towards their goals, and they can see them in real time. The number one question employees have at any company is, how am I doing right now? Right now, that typically gets answered in a really painful once-a-year review process, but now I've got my live statistics dashboard that shows me exactly how I'm doing against all the measurable goals I've been given, and so I can see exactly how I stand, what I need to do to move forward and to progress. That puts an end to these yearly performance reviews, right? I now have the live data. I can see how I'm doing and how my peers are doing at any point in time. I can see who's good at what, right? Gamification is just, we looked at all the different lenses. One way is as reputation, as skill assessment. Who's good at what? And that helps me assemble the right teams and put them together. Badges get a bad knock because everybody throws them on everything. But I think one of the really powerful uses of badges is as a shorthand reputation system, as a way of looking at somebody and very quickly knowing expertise, achievement, accomplishment, commitment to the community, all those at a glance. I look at a Boy Scout, means nothing to me. I can see a number of badges, but if I'm part of that community, there's a shared context, and I understand what every single one of those symbols means. It almost as if I could double click on it. And it tells me, okay, the cow badge means this person has raised an animal and taken a test and visited a farm. That means something in that community, and it's a shorthand way of us communicating to each other. So really, there's this notion that we've been calling the baseball card, right? Every employee has a baseball card with all their stats, and it's live and constantly updating. And once you have that, then all of a sudden you can field the right teams to go and do the right work, right? It's no longer kind of guessing or just assembling people just because they happen to be close by. You get the people with the right skills and the right abilities. You can measure influence networks, right? Who has, we work with SAP on their community network, And you can see, based on the reputation of a number of the participants in that network, their influence, because they don't only earn reputation for contributing content, but also for the quality of the content that they contributed as judged by all their peers. Benchmarking. How is this person doing against this other person? How is this unit doing versus this other unit? How is this whole business doing versus that one? All of a sudden, you now have the data to enable that. The predictive analytics. Again, based on profiling data on the employees that you have today, what can you predict about their future performance and then about the performance of others based on their behavioral patterns? Again, I think you can do some really interesting stuff. Personalization. To me, this is kind of the holy grail, right? You know how Amazon, Netflix, and Facebook, they all create a very personalized experience for you based on your user activity. The things you do, you don't tell them anything for the most part. You just do things. You rate movies and you buy things and you shop for things, and based on that, they are able to personalize the store. So Amazon is not one store for the whole world, it's one store for every single person in the world. Why should a motivation program be any different? If I have individual user activity data on every individual, why can't I create a program or an experience that is customized just to them? I know that they're having trouble with X, Y, and Z. Let me encourage them or motivate them to do more of those things. So all of a sudden now you don't have this universal one-size-fits-all system, but you have one that's very contextually relevant based on details about that one person. And then finally, there's been this discussion recently about systems of engagement versus systems of record, right? So all these systems that we've been talking about, Jive and Salesforce and the rest, they're kind of systems of record. They're like they're databases that you put data into, and they're not very compelling or interesting to use, which is why so many of these enterprise software deployments fail. They don't work well, or they don't get the adoption and the ROI that people expect when they deploy them. And it's because they put these things out there, and there's a lot of very human, valid reasons not to. Like, why would I use the new collaboration platform when I've been using email forever? I have to learn this new thing. Do I do it in here? Do I do it in email? Do I do it in both? How do I make sure people see it? Am I going to look stupid? Do I have to develop a reputation there? All these very valid reasons. And so you have to get over that. And if it's just a system of record, you can't. And that's why so many of these things stall out in the early adoption phase and then in the sustained utilization phase. And so many of these now are trying to evolve to be systems of engagement. The software doesn't just take down what you said, but it actually actively engages with you and gets you to use it and motivates you. And so I think there's a huge opportunity in gamification to be the engine for that system of engagement. So at the end of the day, really, I hope you just kind of remember this stuff. It's all about the thermostat, right? Actively regulating and driving change. That is the key difference that gamification brings to the equation versus anything that's gone out there before. It's about motivating people through data, and it's about turning things from I have to into I want to. Thank you.